What's up, everybody? It's been a long time since we've done a build video, but we're happy to be back for a little bit. So the last 3.5, 4 months we've spent driving 12,000 miles, and now we know a little bit more about our van and what we like in it. So in this video we're going to be doing some upgrades. Starlink, we got new tires, we got a bunch of other good stuff, so stay tuned for it. When we were first building our van, we didn't think we actually needed Starlink just because we're not working full-time and there's not really a need for us to always be connected. However, as we were driving more and more, it was kind of nice to have internet. Now, we picked up the Starlink Mini, which is relatively new. It came out mid-2024. We liked it because it has less power consumption, say 40 watts peak, as well as being an all-in-one router, so we didn't need to have our own access point to connect to it. So it's nice that it's a smaller profile, less power consumption, and it's just easier to set up. Taking a little look at the dish itself, again, this is the Starlink Mini. It's got some pretty simple setup instructions here, but for starters, you have the kickstand. If you were just to lay this on the ground, you have a pole mount, which you could replace this kickstand with, like so, and then a wall wart, and a long span of cable. And of course, this is the mini speed mount by Trio. We got pretty much all the options for it. The polycarbonate cover and the magnets, which is how we're going to be connecting it to the van. So the reason why we went with this, even though it is a little bit more expensive than we would have liked, was because a lot of the Starlink mini mounts rely on this little friction press and screw, or press and click in, and I felt like if we were mounting that on the exterior of the van, that might not be strong enough. So I wish there was actually pieces of hardware which you could screw it into the device itself. That way nothing would ever kind of come out on accident. But with this Trio flat mount, you actually are framing the Starlink Mini inside of this, so it is more secure that way. I'm going to get our dish installed on this flat mount, so it's relatively straightforward. You'll be able to figure it out, but since we did get the polycarbonate and magnet combo, your bolts will go through your cover, through the mount itself, and screw into the magnet. This little trapezoid shape here is where you want to line up your wires. And there we have it. How about right here? Ta-da! That was obviously not too difficult, but the two remaining things that we need to figure out are, number one, how we're going to power this dish while it's mounted on the exterior on top of our roof. We'll have to fish a wire somehow from the exterior into the interior. So I have some ideas on how to do that, but we'll see how it goes. And then the second part, which I think we'll do now actually, is to get the wiring set up on the interior so that we can control the power of the Starlink dish with a switch that we have in idle position for. What my plan is I do have a wiring diagram, and I have kind of seen how I've wired some things because it's been a while since I looked at it. And what we're going to do is we're going to move shower light into our fuse box, which is located behind this panel. And then that should open up a idle line that will run from this switch to the battery bank. And we'll see how it goes. Hopefully nothing blows up. Alright, this is what we're working with back here. From my shower light button, we had these two cables. So one is shower light. This one actually goes to our LED puck light. And then we also have shower light power, which is what we're using to go from our battery bank to this switch that was shower light. We got lucky here because this is the only cable we could have used. All of these devices that are connected to our fuse are low amperage. I'm not too worried about overcurrent or low voltage conditions. So right now what I gotta do is make that cable that'll go from this fuse block to our switch for the shower light. Then I'll be able to connect the shower light back and promote this shower light power to Starlink power. I'm just about to button this up. Here's what we ended up doing. So like I mentioned, we had a run going all the way from our battery bank to this control panel just for our shower lights. So since that is a duplex, I am going to use both sides of the duplex as my positive. One is the power to the switch, and then the other one's from the switch to the Starlink. So that means that I now have power from here to here, which is where I will connect the Starlink adapter. In my case, I'm going to take this red, this will go to our distribution panel, and then this black, quote unquote, will be the positive from the switch that'll go to the Starlink. Then I'll have to take another run of just a single wire from the ground side of the distribution panel, and that'll be the negative side. I've got our control panel, including our new Starlink switch, all buttoned up. And I also have the distribution panel all buttoned up. You can ignore that red light there. That's for our fridge, which we're temporarily powering off. I've got this cigarette outlet, which is all the terminations that I made to the switch. So that switch ultimately turns off and on this cigarette outlet. Now, one of the issues that you'll come across with the Starlink is that you can't just directly hardwire the included 50-foot cable to your batteries, and that's because with the voltage drop over that 50 feet, it's not enough to power your Starlink. So what my plan is to use this cigarette outlet in conjunction with this cigarette plug to step up the voltage from 12 volts from my batteries to 20 volts at 5 amps using this 100 watt PD plug with USB-C. So this is my transformer that's going to step up the voltage. For now, I think we're all done inside. I need to eventually get a hole saw that I could drill a hole into the side of my little distribution pedestal, but I'm just going to leave it at that for now. Which leads me to my next step, which is to get the Starlink mounted on top, as well as getting this wire run through. So I have this USB-C, which will again connect inside of the van, to the DC barrel plug that'll connect to Starlink. So on top of the van, I have to figure out how I got to get this wire through, and I'm not exactly sure at this point, but we'll get it figured out. The Ford Transit has some native pass-through holes that lead from your roof to the interior of the van, but in my case I've used the two optimal ones. So for example, this is over an optimal one, and there's another one back there which I'm already using, and I'm left with this one over here as well as on the other side. So these are less optimal in my opinion, just because there is a seam right there and I don't want to risk kind of an issue with water leakage, but I might have to use that. Ideally, I could have had a junction box right here, which I could have used more than two of these little grommet thingies, but since mine is rounded, I'm not sure I'll be able to use those without having leakage issues. So in hindsight, I should have used square ones of these, in which case I could have added my own, or I could have gone with full-on junction boxes, but from what I've seen, there's not many UV protected ones. So I think what I'm gonna try to do for now is utilize this. It's the best idea that I could come up with. So I'm gonna have to decap this, and hopefully, just based on where I'm seeing that this is located, it runs straight down the D pillar, which would make it a lot easier for me to fish a wire through. So you can see our mini cell insulation there, which means that we're not exactly in the D pillar. However, we should be close still. Okay, so I got the fish tape in, and about 2 inches below this hole on this plane, you can kind of enter the D pillar. So right now I'm down and to the left, and hopefully I can get it to exit right here. Okay, I finally did it. It probably took me like an hour to fish it through, but I did get this through here. Accidentally went like way down here and then I got caught underneath the van, but I'm glad I fixed that. And now I have this, and I'm going to run 2 runs of this string through just so that I have 1 extra in case I ever need to pull something else. Oh, thank goodness. So I'm gonna leave it like that for the night, and then I gotta work on fishing from this side into our electrical bench. Good morning. It's another beautiful day in Southern California. A little smoky from the Eaton and Palisades fires, but at least in Orange County where we're at now, it's not too bad, so it's good enough to keep working. Now I have to figure out how to get from the D-pillar into our electrical bench. This is going to be probably the hardest part because there's limited access in here and there's a bunch of stuff, so I'm going to take some stuff out and then I'm going to shut off power to everything because I don't want to be jamming the fish tape through a bunch of energized wires. You can see the 2 grommets there along the tan wall. So I got to go from one of those to over here. And this is going to be tricky because it's not like a direct line. There's kind of some stuff in the way. So this might take just as long as the one yesterday did. We'll see. We got the head out through here. And hopefully all goes smoothly with pulling this line through it. And there we have it. So we've gotten that pull string through. You can see there's this loop here, but this will all go inside. That leads all the way up to the roof. Next steps are to try and get that USB-C wire through. I want to be cautious with it because I don't want to damage it in any way, or else all that effort would be for nothing. So my goal is to make this as low profile and slim as possible. That way it reduces the chance of snags. So I tied this effectively a slip knot, and now I'm going to tape around it so that hopefully it kind of is a little bit more conical, so it'll slide through things better. Alright, let's see how it goes. For now I'm going to pull straight down this way, and then once I get the wire through, I'll pull it that way. That way I don't have to deal with the friction forces of another bend. Went pretty smoothly, so now we're going to try to pull it through there. Haha. We're in a good spot now. I actually had to re-pull that wire just because I forgot that the waterproof side of the Starlink cable doesn't fit through my entry gland. So I essentially had to re-pull it all the way through to feed the USB-C side, which is smaller, through that little grommet thing and then back down. So I actually ended up having to sand that USB-C just a little bit for it to fit through the grommet housing. So as you can see, I sanded down the sides just a tad bit. One thing that I forgot to mention is that with that spare pull cord that I left, I tied it around a little bolt with a half non-threaded neck, and then I taped it around, and then I put it through the spare port. That way it's waterproof, and if I ever need to, I could just pull this screw out and then the pull cord will come through with it. If I seal it up, then I won't really have access to it without redoing this whole process. So let's test out the Starlink.
She's so annoying.
Why is she annoying? Hi,
Because she wouldn't walk away from the house, so I had to carry her. And then she ran back.
She's like, I don't want to go on a walk, I want to rest.
Yeah. Okay, let's get you some water, bubbies. Okay. Oh, the whole way back.
So it's all plugged in now, and I actually haven't set it up yet. This is the first time I've plugged it in. I'm gonna go through the setup and then hopefully it all works out. Starlink Mini. I have a clear view. So you want to download the Starlink app and then hit setup. Plug in Starlink, connect all the cables. My Starlink is connected. Connect to the Starlink Wi-Fi. Oh, I see a Starlink Wi-Fi. Starlink paired successfully. And optimize your setup. Continue. Determining alignment adjustment may be necessary in a moment for best performance. So since we are flat mounted, we won't have the ability to kind of adjust it. However, if we do have an obstruction with trees where we're parked, then we could just take it off with the magnets and move it somewhere else. So I have read about this, and I hear that it's not that bad, even if it's just flat mounted without it properly tilted in the right way. I expect that there will be some non-optimal performance from it, but I don't expect it to be much. Oh yeah, and I also have the service paused. We've actually owned it for about 2 months and haven't needed it at this point. And that's one of the benefits too, is that you can pause it and unpause it whenever you want. I'm not sure if it's prorated or not, but it is cool that it's relatively easy to pause and unpause with just essentially swiping on your screen. At this point, it looks like Starlink is connected, at least in terms of what we need to do in the van. What I still need to do as far as the Starlink goes is drill a little hole so that I could fit my cigarette outlet against the pedestal. And then I also have to add the entry gland and install the sealant and all of that stuff. So I'm not going to do that in this video, but if you want to see how we install the solar entry gland, you can check out our solar video. In there we walk through all the steps you need to do to install an entry gland, just like the ones that you've seen on the roof. So yeah, I guess with that we can move on to the next little bits. As part of our van improvements, we got new tires. So these are all-terrain tires by Falken. They're Wildpeak T4Ws. We got them in the 245 75 R16 size. So compared to the stock tires that we had on previously, these are about 2.5 inches in diameter bigger, which gives us about 1.25 inches lift. Since we're traveling full-time, we find ourselves seeking free camp spots, which is typically your dispersed camping. Now, all dispersed camping is typically off of dirt roads or gravel roads, which means that having all-terrain tires gives us that feeling of safety and comfort that we're not gonna, for example, pop a tire as we're driving to our campsite. My friend Andy has an uncle that has a shop. He installed the tires for us, got the homie discount right out of the lot. We didn't have any rubbing. Since these are bigger tires, you can expect to have some amount of rubbing, but luckily for us, we didn't have any rubbing whatsoever. The worst rubbing area is about that 270 degrees. So if you turn your wheel 270 degrees from straight, your tire kind of angles towards where you're most prone to having some sort of rub. Luckily we didn't, so we were able to drive it home and we're able to do the modifications ourselves. As you can see here, I used an angle grinder, effectively cutting a little taper down to this little square part at the bottom. So what that looks like was essentially this. So this is what I cut off of that pinch weld. It did take a lot of effort. It wasn't too bad overall, but this metal does get kind of thick, up to 1/4 inch in some places. That added about 1 inch of clearance when we are turned at that worst 270 degree angle, which means that if we do hit a rut or something while we're turning, this is less likely to rub. So previously we only had 1/4 inch, now we have about 1 1/4 inch. So we went with the Falken Wildpeaks just because they were a little cheaper than your typical BFG KO2s, which you see on pretty much most vans. These are a little different size compared to what you would get in the KO2s. We've heard that the KO2s can be a little bit worse in wet weather. However, that is supposed to be solved with the new generation of BFG KO3s. At the time we were trying to replace our tires, they were not sold yet. Since these are larger tires, it means that the spare wheel doesn't fit as well. But what you need to do is essentially deflate your tire to around 20 psi, have it screwed all the way up so it's secured upwards, and then use a ratchet strap to secure it towards the rear of the van so that it's not rubbing against the rear differential. As you can see back here. So it's nice to know we have a fresh set of tires, because previously our spare tire was completely bald and also just kind of cracking. So I'm not even sure if that would have been a good thing if we did hit a road bump. Our next van improvement is a simple one, but it needed to be made for the last like 4 months. So if you've seen any of our content with our van, you'll probably notice that something back here is different. But for those of you who haven't, we finally added a handle pull here, which means that we could install the front for our drawer. So we've been traveling with this piece of wood just kind of hanging around the van for the entire time, just because we didn't have this handle pull. So we had one back at the house and we finally picked it up, which means we finally got to install it. I didn't want to order another one of these because they come in like a set of 10 and I only really needed one. So we finally got that installed, which means our drawer slide is now covered, which I'm happy about. Next up on our list of improvements, and this is more so just defect repair, is trimming down some of our drawer boxes to fit better. So these are fur toe kicks. For a while they were a little bit too long and didn't fit all the way in. They have grooves, so I only really need to trim a little bit off of these 3 pieces and we should be set. I already have all of them marked as far as how much I need to cut off, so let's get to cutting. Safety first. Easy peasy. Just gotta get them screwed in and then we're all set. I also added some duct tape feet to help it glide on our floor a little bit better. Also prevents it from scratching it too. The next item on our to-do list is to add some weather stripping to our driver and passenger side doors. So when we drive around 70, 80 miles per hour and there are gusts of wind, specifically crosswind, something running perpendicular to where we're driving, we get this loud screeching noise that penetrates either the passenger or driver side door. And we've done a little bit of research and it sounds like there is enough, I guess, air pressure to allow a whistle of wind to come in. So to prevent that, we're adding weather stripping. And we just ordered this stuff off Amazon. We'll leave a link in the description if you want to pick some up too. There were some alternatives like adding a rain guard over your window or adjusting your doors, but from what we found, adding this weather stripping is the most consistently beneficial result. So that's what we're gonna try. We're just gonna go around the door and apply this around the edges. So of course with any adhesive, you want to prep your surface. So in our case, we'll be using some isopropyl alcohol and some paper towels to get any oils, and then we'll be sticking this down. We're gonna go essentially from this top hinge all the way around the top to the corner. Then from this corner, we're gonna go straight down to the bottom of the door. So let's see how it goes. Since this kind of naturally curves, I'm going to use that natural curve along our window or our door. That way I'm not fighting against it. And then I'm also not trying to pull it too tight because I don't want any tension when I stick this on. That way if it gets heated, then it's not overstretching and it's not pulling in weird ways. Now we're just going through to make sure it's all firmly secured. Repeat the process for this edge of the door. And here's the finished product. So it's looking pretty good, at least for this side of the door. It actually matches up with this lip of your sliding door. So we're gonna see how all that holds up to the door being opened and closed, but I think I'm just gonna leave it like that for now, and we'll try the other side. Nice. So that was a pretty straightforward process, and I think overall it went really smoothly. Some people have reported that their doors are harder to close after they add this weather stripping. Now, I don't necessarily know if they added it the same way that I did. I did what most people did, but it sounds like some other people end up like framing out more pieces. From what I can tell, the door closes and opens the same. It's no harder or easier than it was before. So time will tell once we hit the road whether or not this was worth it or not, but it's, again, inexpensive and it's worth a shot. Next project. So for a while we've had this blank space above our sliding door, so we're gonna throw a little shelf in there, and it's dual purpose because we also left this edge showing. So we're gonna make sure we edge band this little shelf. So I'm thinking that we're just gonna do a little triangle from about here to, oh gosh, to this corner here. And that should be a nice little place to put a plant. I got our little impromptu workspace here, and I've cut out this little 12-inch triangle. I think it's called an isosceles, but I think this is what we're gonna put there. Luckily we had some leftover Baltic birch, so we didn't have to buy anything, and I also have some edge band left over. So let's go see how this fits. So our plan is for this little triangle to sit right in this little corner, and so far it looks good. One issue that we have is that since this little triangle piece is going to sit below our wall, we have to come up with some little minor backing so that we can screw it into, say, this wall and this cabinet. So let's get those cut. Okay, those little backing pieces are cut. It was interesting because I didn't think about it, but I did have to add these miters here. That way it ends up clean with this edge. Same with this edge, so that means we'll have even more surfaces to edge band. I could smell the iron warming up, and that's pretty much all you really need for edge banding. Essentially what you're going to be doing is ironing on this little veneer onto the edges. So I'm not going to go into too much details, but if you want to learn how to do it, you could check out our upper cabinet video where we go through all the steps, including all the tools that you need. So let's just breeze through this. I finished edge banding all of our exposed sides, and it looks pretty good. I'm happy with it. So I've called upon the finishing department. They've been unemployed for the last 4 months, and now they are going to do some stuff. What's your plan here?
To hold Bailey.
To hold Bailey?
Just kidding. Okay, so I'm gonna sand everything, taking my sanding job back, and then stain it to match our other cabinets in the van. So hopefully we can get the right amount of stain on there and I don't make it too different. And then we'll apply top coat, which we ran out of our previous top coat. So again, hopefully it's not too different from our other cabinets. But
all right, get to work. Windy.
it's cold.
Bailey, what are you doing? Staining time. So I think our stain is a little old. I tried to
So old, it's so gross.
tried to add water to it because it's a water-based stain, but it still came out like kind of oatmeal texture. So it never got smooth even though I was stirring it for a long time. But it looks like it's applying fine. So we'll see how it goes. But it's coming out all right. Not too shabby.
finished staining, and that was quite the effort with some old clumpy stain.
Yeah.
But looks pretty good for using our old stain. So we'll take it, and now Aaron's gonna put it together, and then we'll do top coat last.
Sounds good. Pretty stoked about how this is coming out. It looks really good in this lighting. But before I can assemble it, I want to pre-drill and countersink my screw holes. If this was all assembled, I wouldn't be able to get my drill kind of at this 90-degree angle into this guy. We're all pre-drilled now. Next steps is to glue it together. I'm going to be using a little bit of wood glue. This is type Bond 3. And technically, you're not supposed to glue to stained edges. On this side, we didn't stain it, but I kind of forgot that we had to glue it to something which is stained. So we're going to make it work. It's not optimal, but since this isn't expected to have very much weight on it, we're going to have maybe a fake plant here that weighs less than a pound. This should all be fine. So I'm going to glue it together, get it clamped down, and then I'm going to throw in some brads just to keep everything kind of in place while the glue dries. We've teleported to the backyard because it's time to apply the top coat. On all of our other stain stuff, we used a General Finishes top coat. It was, I think, satin, and it was just brush on. But since we ran out of that and we didn't want to pick up a whole new quart for this small piece, we're going to be using some spray polyurethane in semi-gloss because that's what we had lying around. So we're going to hope that all of this kind of matches together. And if it doesn't, then maybe we can just kind of use some sort of fine grit sandpaper to dull the finish a little bit. Our piece is finally dried. That polyurethane stuff takes forever, but I got it clamped in place now. And you can see that the color's slightly different, but I don't think we're gonna do anything about it. So right now, we're just gonna get this screwed in. 1, 2, 3, 4. And yeah, should be set. Ta-da! Alright, next thing, and I think the last thing on our list is our water tank. So we got a gravity fill port by Volterra, and it turns out that it's not waterproof. So I got the cap off here. You could already see that I've done some amount of modifications to hopefully make it work. For example, putting an O-ring around this little port. Putting a bolt with another O-ring through this fill cap. But essentially it's leaking specifically if we fill it all the way up or if we're on an incline where the water's kind of tilting back. And it's either coming from where this cap holder is. So right now I've got this towel kind of chained around this holder. And this would usually be connected into the middle. So it is not waterproof right there. And then it also leaks from around this seam. So neither of these solutions have worked. At least this one did work. But this O-ring, since this isn't really a threaded port, I mean it's got like a half turn kind of thread, it's not making good contact with the O-ring. So I think I'm going to change this up a little bit and hopefully that works. We'll have to do some tests. Here's what my plan is, and I think this will work, but I purchased this 1/16 inch silicone rubber sheet. So it's 1/16 inch thick. And my plan is to cut a little circle that fits perfectly into the fill cap. That way, when I do screw this on, it kind of clamps down on the rubber. So I'm going to cut out this rubber sheet into a perfect circle to fit inside my cap. Then I could either use the glue to adhere it down, or my alternative plan is to use kind of a setup like this, but with a bigger washer so that this rubber sheet doesn't fall out of place. We'll see. Looks like this isn't going to take very much material, so we got plenty of tries at this. 1.31 inches. Just like that. Okay, so that fits in there nicely. I guess let's just try it out, see how it feels on the van. It's at update, but it looks like no matter how hard I try, I can't get the threads to lock in. So I think that the rubber's pushing it out too far, unfortunately, which means that I think we gotta go with a thinner sheet. So this is 1/16, so I might try 132, but before I do that, I might look through my garage to see if there's anything that is rubberized like this, but slightly thinner. I think I found the lucky winner. So I did find this reusable Ziploc bag, and it is made out of silicone. It's food safe, luckily, which is perfect for our use case. So I did cut it out, and so far it seems pretty good. Putting the cap on the fill port, it fits nice and snugly, and I did test it out, and I turned on the water on our faucet, and usually from the water leaving the tank, there's a little air whistle that you could hear of air kind of seeping in through here, and I don't hear that anymore, so that's a good sign for us. So I'm gonna call this done.
We're gonna end our video there. We'll see you on the next one where we're gonna be packing up the van and getting ready to go to Baja.
Yahoo!
Woohoo!
If you like this video, please like and subscribe.